It says webinar is now streaming live on YouTube.
Okay, cool, perfect.
All right, let's get started.
Let's see if it's actually streaming. Okay, I think it is streaming right now. Okay, I think it is streaming, but it's streaming and yay. Okay, let me resend the link to the chat, just making sure everything is working perfectly. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Cognitive Leap Tech Meets Mental Health podcast series. So in this series, our host, Professor Skip Rizzo, will be engaging in dialogue with very expert in the digital mental health field across the course of the series. So today, our host, Professor Skip Rizzo, will be interviewing Dr. Walter Greenleaf on the topic of the history of virtual reality and its application in the mental health field. So this event is brought by Cognitive Leap Solutions, Inc. And just a little bit about our sponsor today. It's founded in California in 2015, headquartered in Shanghai, has an operations center in Shenzhen as well. So Cognitive Leap Solution is committed to utilize the world's leading professional resources, integrating high-tech products and with advanced applications and combining with technology to address prevalent problems with attention, learning, and emotional issues among children and adolescents aged from 3 to 18. So at Cognitive Leap, we offer a very comprehensive closed loop solution to children and with attention and emotional challenges. So our interventions including innovative virtual reality attention tracker, 8 online assessments, precision AI-based brain optimizing training, therapeutic music exercising, and family-assisted programs. So the company has a very strong research and development team with world-renowned experts who focus on neurology, cognition, psychology, engineering, and artificial intelligence. So we're currently working on an FDA study for the approval of our virtual reality classroom, diagnosing ADHD in children. So I would like to introduce to our very special host today, Professor Skip Rizzo. Professor Skip is the Director for Medical Virtual Reality at the Institute for Creative Technologies at USC. And he's also the research professor at USC Davis School of Gerontology and USC Keck School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. So Professor Skip has been around in the field of virtual reality for a very long time, and he has been serving as an advisor for Cognitive Leap, exploring ways to address attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in children. So welcome, Dr. Skip.
Hi. All right. I guess we're ready to go. First off, I'd like to welcome everybody who has signed in for this presentation, actually not a presentation, a conversation with my good friend and colleague, Walter Greenleaf. Walter's been around even longer than me. First off, I would like to thank Cognitive Leap for sponsoring this and setting this up. This will be a monthly podcast. I know many people are doing podcasts with various folks in VR. I'm going to try to make this a little bit different in the sense of trying to make it more of a historical document to record these conversations with people that were in the very early days of virtual reality, and also mix it up with some of the younger mover and shakers of the current era, and really try to have a lively mix of folks, but make it more relaxed and hear more about the personal stories of people and how they struggled or faced the challenges of riding the crazy train of virtual reality into the future. Many challenges along the way, and I think it's important for these things to be documented and available for folks to hear directly from the horse's mouth. And we're doing this live, so this is, there's going to be some bugs and warts along the way, but hopefully that'll add to the charm. So with that, I'd like to introduce, again, my good friend and colleague, Walter Greenleaf. And I think it'll be apparent in the course of our conversation, his contribution to this field. But I'd just like to say, Walter was my first VR friend back in the early 90s. We met at a conference called Virtual Reality in Persons with Disabilities. And so, Walter, why don't you kick it off? What brought you to that event? And tell us a little bit about what you were doing up to that point.
Okay, well, Skip, thank you for being my friend for more than 3 decades. We've certainly had a lot of adventures and more to come. And we've been very privileged to work in a field that has both meaning and excitement about it. I got involved in virtual reality technology back in the late 1980s. Just before I met you, I was good friends with Jaron Lanier, who is credited with coining the phrase virtual reality. I actually had a bit of a disagreement with him. There was a time where we didn't have a phrase to describe interactive, immersive environments, and Jaron started promulgating that phrase, and I thought it was a little bit too glib. But now that we're using it, and now that it's actually been shortened down to just saying, much like we say AI instead of artificial intelligence, we say VR instead of virtual reality. I guess it wasn't too bad a descriptive term. But Jaron and I were friends. I was a research scientist working at Stanford as a graduate student, and we had some work that we were doing together on technology. And Jaron developed a technology for measuring movement, a data glove. And he had developed a system using some very expensive computers to do programming by putting code together using the data glove. And that evolved into one of the first commercial virtual reality systems. There had been other academic groups looking at simulations, 3D simulations, but Jaron started a company named VPL Research, which was the first commercial company back in the late 80s working in this arena. Long story for another time, but I ended up having licensing the medical rights to VPL Research's technology. And I started developing, while I was still a grad student, a company to develop medical products. And along the way, I got excited about the application of VR technology to support people with disabilities, both as a way to be a disability interface, but also to understand and assess movement impairments, cognitive impairments, and to be able to design and build therapeutic interventions to support a variety of clinical problems. And that's where you and I met. Harry Murphy, who was running the Center on Disability Solutions for Cal State Northridge, put together a conference on virtual reality and disabilities. And I can't remember if it was the first time we had the conference or the second time we had the conference, but Ray Bradbury was one of the keynote speakers, and I had an opportunity to have dinner with him. I think you were there too, and it was just magnificent. So that was one of the kickoffs to some of our many adventures together.
Well, it's been quite some time since those days. Some people say that any kind of real medical intervention, going from bench to bedside, about 15 years. It's taken virtual reality a bit longer. Did you expect back then, with the vision that we all shared about how VR would have a significant impact, did you think it would happen quicker, or to, be where we are today, but have it happen sooner? Or what kept you going during some of the tough years when the technology was still evolving?
Well, it has been a long, slow burn to get to where we are today. And in applications of VR technology to medicine, we all thought it would occur much faster. As a matter of fact, I think we all were saying in 5 years, we'll be able to do this. And in 5 years, we'll be able to do that. And I think part of that was optimism. Part of it was naivete. And part of it was 5 is an interesting number. If you'd said in 2 years, most people would have realized that that was not likely to happen. If you say 10 years, most people would feel like, oh, it's never going to happen. But if you say 5 years, it's sort of at a good spot where things might happen. But we do know that in medicine, because of the need to validate, the need to really understand and design for safety as well as effectiveness, that it does take a lot longer to make products. What I thought would happen faster was the adoption of virtual reality technology in the larger consumer and enterprise arena. We felt that as electronics got smaller, as things got faster, we'd have it. But it really wasn't until maybe 6 or 7 years ago when Oculus came out with its system that there was a big state change where we could see something that was more comfortable to wear, something that was affordable, as opposed to the VR systems that cost tens of thousands of dollars and had head-mounted displays that were awkward to wear and heavy and also expensive. So no, I'm surprised it took so long. In terms of what kept me going, well, I think the opportunities to use VR in the clinical area are just really profound, especially in the zone of mental health care, where we need some very effective solutions that can scale and reach a larger population. So what kept me going was the potential, that the importance and the potential of how VR technologies could be applied to clinical care.
Yeah, I'd say about the same thing. I look back to 1995 when I first came to USC, and it was, a rude awakening about how primitive the technology and the cost and complexity, to do this. But I was thinking, by 2000, we'll be at a state of readiness to really do some stuff. So let's spend the next 5 years doing the foundational work. It took a little longer, but I'd have to say that part of the motivation was it was like an addiction where you eventually got a little bit more each time. And it took a long time, but I remember in 2000 was when we were able to shift from a big Silicon Graphics reality engine or whatever it was called, a refrigerator sized computer that cost about $200,000, and go to a PC and be able to deliver VR off a PC. And that was like groundbreaking. I remember getting licenses for Open Inventor to translate the stuff from the SGI for the stuff we had built on that to run on a PC. But it incrementally built. And fortunately, I think, in my position, I'm a fan, of course, but is that the technology has, in fact, caught up with the vision that we had back then. And that's a good thing. So, what's your observations about where we're at today with this, evolved technology?
Let me say, to go back to one of your comments you just made, I do think along the way some very important things were done. It wasn't like things got started and then nothing happened for a long time. All along the way, very hardworking research groups such as you and your team have been validating, exploring, understanding where the technology can be applied. And because of the cost of the systems, it didn't really escape the academic research arena or the high-end commercial research groups until we had something that was consumer priced. But important work was done along the way, showing the value of the technology for helping treat addictions or helping to treat stroke and post-stroke rehabilitation. So it wasn't like nothing happened, but it is different now that we have the ability to deploy the VR and AR technology at scale, and that's a very exciting point to be. In terms of some of the things that are going on now that are landmark, well, it's just exciting to see that some of the larger medical device companies have jumped into the arena and are bringing VR as part of their therapeutic platforms and their assessment platforms. It's exciting to see some of the pharmaceutical companies building the technology into complementary therapies to go along with their medications. And it's also fantastic to see so much of what's going on in the zone of health and wellness, where there are systems that people can subscribe to or purchase that are relatively low cost, that can help with stress, that can help with anxiety, that can help with mood disorders, can help with pain mitigation. It's just It's just there's a abundance of opportunity going on right now. But you know the expression, the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. I think that's part of the problem is we have some really amazing things that have escaped the academic research arena and are ready to go clinically. But there's still mostly the early adopters who are pioneers to bring the new technology in. Medicine changes slowly, and it's good that it's conservative and changes slowly because we need to make sure we do things right. But the power of VR technologies applied to clinical assessments and clinical care just hasn't gotten out beyond the early adopter stage.
You know, you mentioned the science, and you know, I think it's pretty much acknowledged that in mental health and rehab, we probably have the largest scientific literature of any VR use case. And as you said, many hardworking people along the way did whatever they could incrementally to document this. What areas do you think, you know, we can say, we can hang our hat on and say, you know, this is pretty close to evidence-based. Yeah, we, of course, we always need more research, always got to have the multiple randomized controlled trials and so on. What areas do you think, you know, you would feel you could put your reputation on that this is substantially successful for clinical applications?
Well, you know, skipping away, I think it'd be easier for me to say what areas do we not have a lot of work on justifying the use clinically. I think there's also the other question is which products are more refined in terms of having a good user interface, having a good connection to electronic medical records, to having good analytics. But in terms of what clinical indications do we know that VR and AR solutions can be effective? It's almost everyone. It's just a matter of you know, applying it the right way. But you know, I'm excited by what's going on with addressing both acute and post-acute stroke rehabilitation. I'm excited by what's going on in helping people on the autism spectrum learn social skills. I'm excited by what's been shown to work for helping people with addictions manage their cravings and learn situational confidence and refusal skills. I'm really excited about what we've seen going on with addressing both acute and chronic pain. There's a tremendous amount of evidence indicating the value of these approaches, not the large scale clinical trials that one would expect to see, for example, with a new drug that you swallow or something that gets inserted under the skin, but in terms of applying a powerful system for both assessments, objective assessments, and for clinical interventions, I think we're there. I think it's just that the products need to be built out a little bit more and more analytics, more connectivity. But I think we're over the threshold of do we know what works and what doesn't work, what's effective, what's not effective. Now it's just a matter more of degree and building the right way of doing it as opposed to understanding what the right approach is.
You know, I think one of the bottlenecks for some of the questions about how far the research has come is that people don't often recognize that to be a VR developer or scientist, you have to wear many hats. You've got to, you know, you got to have your clinical expertise down. That's just like a foundational basis. But you also got to build stuff, and you got to, and to build this stuff, you've got to have programmers. You got to have great graphic artists. You got to have interface designers. Then you've got to run the research. And so, you know, a lot of times trying to get funding to do all this, you know, like for example, you go to NIH and they really want you to already have a built system and to run a clinical test with it. You know, you go to NSF, you know, they might be critical of something that's too clinically oriented. Where's the you know, the hard engineering science? And so I think there's kind of a special person that is a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary type person where you take your skills and you form a team What can you just mention? Do you have any teams that you've worked with that have done this in a way that is close to your heart? You know, where you've got all the pieces in place. Now the spotlight's really on you because you can't point the finger at not having the resources, but it's really your creative skills to putting it all together.
Well, I think you're absolutely right that because we're developing products that incorporate both, wearable sensors and machine learning and user interface and computer generated graphics, and there's a tech layer, there's a creativity layer, there's a clinical protocol layer. It's a complex thing, and so it's more than just one or two people building something. It really takes a team, and it takes financing to do. So, but I'm excited by the fact that I think we have crossed over that threshold. There are companies like Cognitive Leap that have put together well-designed and built systems. There's, one of the things I'm excited about is a company that you and I both know, Penumbra, that has developed a stroke mitigation system for clinical care, and is moving into other areas of clinical care. To have a large public company make a commitment to developing a medical VR platform is really significant. There's groups like Synovian working with Behavior, having a pharmaceutical company get into this area. So I do think, and there's other groups that we don't have time to list, they're just doing fantastic work and helping patients with technology right now. So I do think you're right. It takes a lot of work. It takes a large team. It takes financing, and it takes time. But I think we've crossed over, and we now have some great examples of well-designed products that are out in use clinically, and it's just going to build from there. And I should mention, I've talked about assessments and I've talked about therapeutics, but also virtual environments are fantastic for training surgeons how to do skills, to do preoperative planning, or teaching how to handle a difficult conversation with a patient about a terminal illness. Your work on virtual patients is really significant. So it's more than just the interventions and the assessments. It's also the training systems that are enabled by virtual reality technology.
You know, as you talk about these teams, one of the things I've found on my journey is that I've learned so much from the people I've worked with. I would never, I'm a psychologist, but now I know a little bit about programming, and I know a little bit about graphic arts, and I know a little bit about interface design and so on. And part of that comes from sort of a unique community in the VR space, because we've met people since the 90s that are still going, and and they're a special kind of person. Can you talk a little bit about some of the cast of characters that have hung in there over the years, and some of the people that have had an impact on your thinking? Because there is a tight bond in the VR community. I play rugby, and whenever I can meet a rugby player, a guy wearing a t-shirt on the street, and gab with them for 10, 20 minutes, not even knowing the person, because there's that bond, that brotherhood. And I feel the same thing with VR folks, except we don't typically wear VR t-shirts in public. Once in a while, I have a couple that I wear. But, can you talk a little bit about the sense of community and the kind of person that's drawn into this field, and some of the youngins that are coming into the field now or over the last 5-10 years? Is there a core personality type or?
Well, I think it does take someone who is willing to take a risk. If you're building your academic career or you're building your startup business and you're choosing to go into unexplored territory, you have to be very self-assured, and you have to be a risk taker. In academia, often being very, very focused on something that's an incremental improvement is the best way to get appropriate funding and to get tenure. If you're doing a startup business, focusing on things that are, there's a clear dotted line to get to a product to market is what you need to do. So I think one commonality of the people that we've met over the years in our arena is that they're optimistic, they're self-assured, and perhaps a little bit naive about how much work needs to be done to make something happen. But there is a certain camaraderie, maybe because it is such hard work, and also I think because I don't think people feel competitive. It's such unexplored territory that even if you have a business that's developing a particular clinical application, the other groups that are working on that too are really your comrades, because you're trying to show the overarching arena the value of this approach, and so everybody is welcome. I know you and I went for, I think, 22 years to the Medical Meets Virtual Reality meeting. And we had a lot of friends that we met there, colleagues. They were mostly from the academic arena and mostly research scientists or clinicians who were doing studies and taking the risk to build that out and understand what's going on. That meeting doesn't go on right now. It's evolved. There's now a series of meetings. The International Virtual Reality Health Association, for example, has an annual conference in Nashville, and then they also have an annual conference in Dublin for Europe, and it's gaining momentum. There's other groups too, but they're not as much just academicians. What's exciting is that it's now academicians. It's also technologists. It's also people from the medical device arena, people from the pharma industry, people from large healthcare networks. It's really everybody who's a player and people from the regulatory agencies. So it's gone beyond just an academic group of comrades and friends. It's now also people from really all aspects of the healthcare ecosystem. And that's very exciting.
Yes, I still attend a conference that was started in 1996, the International Conference on Disability, VR, and Associated Technologies. Another good buddy who I'll have on this podcast in the future, Paul Sharkey, started it. And it's amazing the people that are still around from 1996 that have gone every year. And it's like an alumni gathering, but we get to share the passion for the things we love. And it is a broad mix of individuals. But, the things I would add to the list of people that have been in the field and they create the sense of community is they have passion and they have a concern for making a difference. And they're also not satisfied with the tools that have been available in the past. I think a key element is that, folks that do this work see a better way and want to be part of that. Okay, well, this community has evolved. The technology has evolved. What are the bottlenecks moving forward, and what are some of the challenges that we're not going to see solved maybe in our lifetime, which we're a little bit older than probably most of the people watching this, but in the next things that aren't going to be solved in the next 5-10 years, and maybe throw this into the mix. I've always thought that VR has been like a siren song for entrepreneurs, luring them with the beauty of the song and the vision and the idea onto the rocks. We've all seen companies with great ideas, initial development, but they don't hang in for the long run, most of the time due to funding issues or technical roadblocks. So I know this is a big mess of a question, but maybe you can just riff off of that.
Well, sure. I think what the constraints and the challenges are now are different than they were before. I think before we needed to build up basic systems and understand where the blind alleys were and where the opportunities where work can make a big impact. And to respond to one of your earlier parts of your question, I think what's kept the community going is in healthcare. We understand the meaningfulness and the importance of what we're doing and are willing to work extra hard because we know, and many people are are enabled by a personal passion. Maybe they've had a relative who had a neurodegenerative disease, or they have a friend who has chronic pain. And that builds that sense of meaningfulness of what you're doing is really wonderful, because I think in other arenas where it's tough going, if your sole motivation is to make some profit, it's harder to get the energy going for that, at least in my opinion, and it builds a tight community. In terms of the constraints, well, I think one of the things that we haven't done as good a job as we could and need to do and will do is looking at the impact of bringing new technology to the business ergonomics of the clinical ecosystem. It's one thing to develop something that helps in a significant way address an important problem, but we also have to make sure it doesn't, if we bring it into someone's home or we bring it into a clinic, that it doesn't consume extra time. If it doesn't, that the cost is justified, that we don't, the people who are using it don't have to hire an extra staff person just to charge the batteries. And we also have to make sure that things interdigitate with the existing way of keeping records, the addition. So I think we're at the stage right now where we're refining the products that we know and the approaches and the protocols that we know have value to make sure they fit into the existing ecosystem in a better way. So I think that's one of the constraints. I think we do need to do larger scale studies. Most of the validation studies that we have right now showing clinical efficacy are on small sample sizes, because previously the technology was very expensive and hard to deploy. So we need to go back with today's technology and do larger size studies for some of the areas that are more on the clinical zone. And I think we also need to, need to do a better job of making sure that systems talk to each other. Right now, it's a bit of a wild west, and it's not just for medical VR. Really, digital health in general. There's so many different apps. Some well designed, some not so well designed, but they all have different ways of approaching a problem, different looks and feel, different approaches. And I think the same is true for VR right now and in the clinical arena. And I think we do need to do a better job of maybe coming up with a standard approach and platform. If I rent an automobile and I get into it, I don't have to relearn how to drive or where the steering wheel is going to be or how to turn on. I need to get familiar with that particular system, but I know the basics. And I think we need to have a little bit more of that going on in the various things that we're doing clinically with VR. And we need to have some standardized, culturally diverse, age-appropriate virtual environments that we can use to do studies across groups so that we can compare different systems to each other using some standard systems. And there's groups that are working on that right now. You asked a big question, so there's one more component to it that you asked, which are, what are the concerns and moving forward? And I do worry that we haven't done enough to understand the impact of spending a lot of time in a virtual environment with today's technology on the developing brain. We are basically fooling the vestibular ocular system in our brain with the way we put a flat screen right in front of the eyes, and it works. We feel like we're cognitively immersed, but I do worry if people, especially young people, spending a lot of time in a virtual environment, what the effect is on the developing visual system. So I think we need to look at that. I think we also need to think about making sure, especially since we're using machine learning systems, that we're not building biases into the way we do assessments. It's great that we can move from subjective assessments in mental health care and behavioral health care, but I think we need to make sure that as we come up with new ways of assessing cognition and behavior and mood, that we're savvy enough to make sure we don't build into the algorithms any biases that we might have. So those are just a few of my concerns.
Yeah, I think that you zeroed in on a couple of important challenges. the piece of good news about the near eye display issue is that most clinical applications for VR aren't really requiring somebody to wear a headset, for 5 hours in a row. They're usually 20 minutes to an hour,
Right.
somewhere in there. And I think we need to study this more, but I'm also anticipating that the technology will evolve a bit, so that maybe near eye.
Yeah, and let me be clear, I'm not so worried about the clinical use, because you're right, we don't spend extended periods clinically. I'm more concerned about the effect on people who, maybe, young children whose parents work several jobs and who leaves them at home with a VR system for 6 or 7 hours, they might be in it at a time. And because we don't know what that is. But I think you're absolutely right. In the clinical environment, if it is extended time spent in it, it's usually justified by the value of what we get out of it.
Okay, here's a fun question. If you had unlimited resources and 2 years to do something in VR, what would you do? And would it be much different than what you're doing now?
I think an area that really is underdeveloped, that's really important. Actually, I'm going to name 2 areas. One is looking at helping people with addictions. I think virtual environments can be used in a very powerful way to help people get, there's a physical aspect of addictions, but there's also a learned behavioral aspect of it. And virtual environments are fantastic ways to help people learn situational confidence, practice refusal skills, learn to manage their cravings. And it's not just things that are in the substance of abuse zone, but also, maybe managing your weight and changing your behavior to get better exercise. I think there's aspects where VR can help in so many ways that we really haven't gone deep into. So that's where I would maybe choose to focus. Certainly within mental health care, because we really need to scale, especially addressing anxiety and depression. Another area that I'm really very excited about the opportunities are, and I know you are too, Skip, is helping people on the autism spectrum. That I think simulations can be a fantastic way. We can slow down the speed of the world. We can exaggerate nonverbal communication, and that's important for being able to teach anyone improved social skills, etc. And in terms of I think you were also asking what's missing right now in terms of technology to really do things effectively. And I think where we have problems right now in virtual reality applications in general, and in particular in healthcare, is multi-user. It's sometimes virtual environments are very lonely. You're there by yourself doing something. Maybe you're recovering from a stroke, or maybe you're learning a skill, but it's usually by yourself. And if other people are there, they're there, they look like robots. They don't have facial expressions. They don't have other aspects of nonverbal communication. And I think we can do better than that. So I think that's one area where we need to make some progress.
I agree with all those target areas. I think we can really make a difference in all of those areas. And I would add to the pile, even though you alluded to it with anxiety, addressing trauma. A pitch for my own one of the topic areas of interest for me. And I think we're just recognizing there's so much trauma in the world. Beyond combat related experiences, and I think there's a real place for VR to make a difference for victims of sexual assault, victims of terrorist attacks, maybe improve the mental health of first responders, different kinds of training that tackle emotional regulation, say in policing. And now with COVID, the real challenges between survivors or people left behind of people that died from COVID, healthcare professionals on the front line. I'm hearing more and more about people just being burnt out from the last year. I think there's just, that's one thing, that I think Winston Churchill said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And, I think the COVID situation has opened up opportunities, certainly in telemedicine and teletherapy. I think we're at a point now where without COVID, it would have taken 5 years to get to this point. All of a sudden, the urgency of the problem drove adoption, and it got people who were hesitant, that never would have thought about delivering care in this manner. They were forced to have to learn. And so, some of these challenges may drive innovation in ways that are unexpected. I'm trying to be an optimist that we're going to pull something.
No, you're absolutely correct. And your work doing the fundamental basic research showing how virtual environments can be used to address post-traumatic stress, to teach people emotional regulation skills. And also you did a lot of work on rehabilitation using virtual environments too. You've had a pretty broad foundational reach to lay the pathway for other people. And I think now the work that you and our colleagues have done is being translated out into clinical products, and it's so exciting. But you're absolutely right. I think there's the concern about the second pandemic of mental health challenges as we reemerge, which we are starting to do now from sheltering. People are going to have tremendous anxiety about returning to work, getting back to where things were, and I think we can use what we've learned about how to help with anxiety and how to help with depression. Some of the skills that have been built into some of the therapeutic virtual environments can be deployed. And I think we've got a lot of wind in our sails now, because of now we understand that you don't have to always be in the same room with a patient to provide support and help, and that if we leverage technology appropriately, we can make a big difference and reach underserved populations who otherwise might not have access to clinical care.
Absolutely. Breaking down barriers to care is one of the directions I think VR can really make a big difference in. One last question, because we got a whole pile of questions in the Q&A, but one last one to close off our discussion here. If you had to do over, I'm probably going to ask this of everybody that is on the podcast. If you had it to do over, would you still get mixed up with VR? Was there any times that you thought maybe I should do something different?
Well, I'm going to ask you the same question in return, Skip, but I'll start. No, I would not do anything different. It's been a hard slog with many slow, long evenings working hard to get to where we are. And but I really do feel that the field needs people like you, people like me, people like our other colleagues to move it forward. And we would not be where we are unless a lot of people had put a lot of hard work into it. And I have found it to be very meaningful, and I'm proud of what you and I and our colleagues have accomplished over the years. And I feel it's going to make a big difference. So no, I wouldn't change it. It's been fun, it's been rewarding, and it's been meaningful. So it's no, I wouldn't change anything. Well, how about you? You've put a lot of hard work into this too, Skip. How are you feeling?
I wouldn't change a damn thing, because I don't know if there's anything else I could do. I feel like, I was just very blessed to have been born at a certain time, and to have worked in the field of clinical care, and that really, that's how my work evolved into VR, being frustrated with what we had the capabilities to do for people after brain injuries, and helping them to recover function. I look back at it when I review in my head, I'm lying awake at night worrying about that next grant application. I start reviewing in my head, and it's like watching a kind of an interesting movie, thinking about all the challenges, and all the mistakes you make that you try not to make again. You don't want to make newer, bigger, and more creative mistakes as you move forward. But I wouldn't change anything either. And now the existential challenge for people like us now is, well, will you ever retire? What would I do? Golf?
We're having too much fun, I think,
Yeah.
and also the field still needs us. It's still emerging. But you know, Skip, what's also been great about what we've been doing is it has been cross-disciplinary. We've had to master electronics and sensors. We've had to master programming and software, and we've had to master some creative design aspects of building quests and interesting, engaging applications into what we're doing. We've had to understand science and clinical care, and to some extent also understanding the business ecosystem. So, you know, I think for people that are, you know, not good at focusing, which I'll accuse you and admit to myself, I think being able to work in something that's been so cross-disciplinary has been really, you know, a gift, and I feel fortunate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very good. Let's maybe move on to some questions. Jessica, you want to pull up a few for us?
Yeah, so we got a lot of questions from our audience. So first one is, what are the factors that you think really affect availability of virtual reality technology to like common like use? Because we now seen a lot of like medical, like clinical use of VR technologies, but what about like what are the factors that you think is really affecting how these medical devices as using VR technology to be more accessible to the patients at home instead of in a clinical setting? And how can that gap be between the audience and the VR technology be minimized? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Walter, you want to give that a go? Or?
Sure. Well, I think we're at a transitional phase right now where we have a new way of helping people on a variety of levels with technology that's been demonstrated to be effective. However, we need to refine it, and we need to do the business engineering to take these very effective products and figure out how do they fit into the ecosystem. And one of the things that has been holding it back is that VR is not ubiquitous in terms of its general use. I think soon it will go into the business enterprise as, you know, as part of how we work with information, how we communicate with each other. It will also have a larger role in entertainment, but until that happens, and until more people are familiar with VR technology, and also I think we need to have some improvements on the technology too. We can do some amazing things with what we have right now, but I don't think it'll become much more common until we have lighter weight headsets. I don't think price is as much of a barrier right now, because I think at least in the clinical area and the health and wellness arena, it's the cost is justified. But I think it is a matter of, you know, it's still exotic in some extent until it becomes more, people are more familiar with it, the way we're familiar with mobile phones and tablets and personal computers. I think it'll take a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's we have a real follow-up question about your answer. It's do you anticipate an increase in the commercial VR products in healthcare realm for personal use or for rehab or for like personal use, where any like healthcare related use, but for personal, like not for like medical? Do you expect an increase in that anytime soon, or would you expect in the long term?
Well, if you look at the parts orders that the tech titans have in place for parts for the HMDs, you can see that things are accelerating. And if you look at the adoption curve of VR and AR technology compared to mobile phone technology or the VCR or personal computers, we're actually it's increasing at a steeper rate of acceptance than other next generation technologies. So I do expect it'll become, you know, much more common soon. I think we just need to have more, you know, examples of how it can be used to support, you know, maintenance of complex equipment or repairing your automobile, things like that. As that gets out more common, we'll see it. But, you know, the good news in healthcare, some of the larger healthcare networks are aggressively investing and studying the value of technology like this to reduce their cost and help them support their people who are part of their systems. So it is happening. It's just it's mostly still at the early adopter stage. But I do see, a day where we will have in our home, just as we have a variety of tablets and computers and mobile phones now, I think we'll have a variety of AR and VR systems. And a lot of how we will be using it is to promote health and wellness and reduce isolation and as a platform for clinical care, especially with an aging population. We have a looming crisis beyond the current pandemic. I think in 10 or 15 years, it'll hit even hard. And that's that our seniors are living a lot longer. We have a smaller portion of family sizes to provide caregiving support. And yet there'll be an increased proportion of people with chronic pain, recovering from stroke, neurodegenerative disease, Parkinson's, other problems that there's a high proportion of in an older population, and our populations will be top heavy. So we need to get this technology out to prevent that economic and social crisis that's looming. And so I think it will happen. I think we're ready. I think there's no reasons not to. And we have to actually accelerate, I think, the adoption. But how do you feel, Skip? Do you feel that things are moving in the right direction?
Yes, I think that the movement towards making VR available to patients or users in the home serves to, again, to break down barriers to care. At the same time, I think we've got to do the proper clinical science to make sure that we're not just making self-help stuff available online without the consultation of a clinical care provider, an expert. When people self-diagnose and then self-treat, you oftentimes run into trouble with that. And I believe we've got to push as much out of the clinical office as possible. But I still think we need to have good clinical expertise kind of guiding therapeutic processes. Now, health and wellness, that may be the little side way to help people to manage stress a little better, not a direct treatment of a clinical condition or diagnosis, but we're with standalone headsets, which is really, I think, going to be more the norm in the future. Every home will have a VR headset, like a toaster. You might not use it every day, but every home will have one, and that's be an excellent vehicle to be able to deliver things that you could never get at home in the past. So a lot of options, a lot of promise, but we also have to know where the line gets drawn, and that'll become particularly relevant as AI evolves and comes into the mix. That could be another hour discussion here. But anyway, another question, Jessica?
Yeah, so we have one more we actually have multiple questions, but I think I can compile those questions and send speakers to maybe reply to our comments. But one last question. So there's a former TED Talk speaker, Jack Wilmore, spent a week in VR to draw attention to the budding scientific realm, but also report on its effects. He noted that after some point, his mind did not differentiate between the VR world and real world, similar to like body transfer illusion. To consider this extreme, would you still say the effects of long-term use of VR is a concern? So during the podcast earlier, Professor Rizzo said clinical use typically does not run this time length, like it doesn't last as long, like typically. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I'll start. And I think that we'll get better at having people be more fully immersed. We're bringing olfaction, dimensional olfaction and sensory smells to the system. We're getting better at tracking movement. We're getting better at understanding through measuring voice tone and facial expressions, mood and cognitive function, and developing systems that have a measurement of cognitive load so they can provide the virtual environment at a pace that people can understand. But I think it's not going to happen at all soon where we won't distinguish being in a real world versus a virtual world. I think we always will have a sense of that. And I do think that the pace of coming up with innovative applications will will pace the evolution of the technology, but I think we're above threshold right now. I think what we have right now, we're ready to use, and it will just get better. So I'm optimistic, and I don't think we need to spend, for most of the therapeutic applications I know of, I don't think we should or need to spend much time in a simulated environment.
I think that what that question really speaks to is the capacity for VR to fool the brain. And the brain is geared towards taking physical energy and transducing it into a perception. And we see this in everyday light, electromagnetic energy, and it creates a vision of what you're seeing around you. And in VR, you're playing with those same properties of physical energy, and the brain responds. Certain areas of the brain respond in ways like they would respond in the real world. And this is what we try to leverage when we create simulations to help someone become emotionally activated, or to address fears, or to feel more comfortable. So I think that experiment of spending a week in VR kind of illustrates it. I don't think we're going to be running into problems in the near future anyway with people wearing a headset for a week and having that same experience, unless somebody comes up with something really good. But so I think I look at that question as really a statement about why we love it, the magic of VR. And you've got to have you got to know where to draw the line. But this is a transformational technology, and now can we leverage it for good?
Yeah, thank you for all the wonderful answers. I think we will answer the rest of the questions through email format because we won't have enough time for today. So Skip, we will just get started with the ending. Thank you.
Okay, well, first off, I want to thank Walter for spending time with me today. Even though this is like a typical conversation we have on a regular basis, but now we get to share it with folks and record it for history. But our next conversation will be with Brett Leonard, and I'm excited about this. By the way, you misspelled his name. It's Brett, not Brent. But he directed the movie Lawnmower Man, which I think all of us probably saw in those days. If we were around then, and it inspired us, even though a little bit over the top in some ways. But I'm really looking forward to hearing his insights from what led up to that, what was the repercussions, the real story of Lawnmower Man, and how he's moved forward in the field of VR. I've actually got him here because I'm working with him on a project right now, and we'll talk about that. I'm excited, but I wanted to start the first one with you, Walter, because you're my best VR buddy, and what better way to start off this series?
Well, and thank you to Cognitive Leap for facilitating this, and I'm excited by the work that's being done by you, Skip, with Cognitive Leap. I think it's very important.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming to the event. And at the end, I just want to say, thank you guys for putting the time and giving us this amazing talk about the history of VR and also the newest trend, everything. And I'm really appreciating, because a lot of our participants actually are also students who are interested in continuing this field in the future. So you guys are leading the next generation of virtual reality scientists or people who will be working in the field. Thank you so much for your time. And at the end, I just want to give a little bit about what Cognitive Leap has been working on about the VRAD FDA approval trial that we're doing. So we are actually looking for a 6 to 13 years old to participate in the study to finally getting our VRAD, the virtual reality attention tracker, which is our ADHD diagnosing tool using the VR technology that Dr. Greenleaf and Professor Rizzo just talked about. Is really exciting, and we're trying to get this approved as soon as possible. So we're collecting data with these participants. So if you are interested in participating, or any kids from family, friends, or anyone who might be interested in participating, you can email info@cognitiveleap.com for more information, or scan the QR code at the bottom right corner to fill an interest form. So these are the study sites that we have. So looking forward for you to participate in the study as well. Yeah, so once again, just thank you everybody for coming to our first event. And I hope you have learned so much from our amazing speakers today. And thank you again to Dr. Greenleaf, and thank you to our host, Professor Rizzo. So we're really looking forward to a future conversation that this series can bring to us. And for our audience, the video recordings of the event will be available on YouTube on our channel at Cognitive Leap Solutions, Inc. So please feel free to share with anyone who might be interested in this topic. I'm sure they will learn a lot from this video as well. So as mentioned before, we're hosting our second event on May 13th at 12 p.m. Pacific time. So please mark your calendar for the upcoming event. We'll be sending out an email to about the event registration. So we're really looking forward to seeing you again on our second event, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
All right.
We're still being recorded?
Okay, I just paused the recording. Thank you guys for coming. Bye.